Hey everyone. So we in our previous video we finished lesson 2 on genetics, and so unit 2 on genetics. So now we're starting unit 3, and unit 3 is evolution. And so as part of our evolution unit, we're going to learn about the human body. And then we're going to learn about bacteria and viruses and how they impact the human body. And then we're going to go into how bacteria reproduce and how they grow and how they become stronger. And so that is the first part of Unit 3, Bend 1. And then the second part of Unit 3, Bend 2 will be evolution on a large scale. We're going to look at evolution of larger animals. Okay, so first, before we get into bacteria, we're going to backtrack a little bit and talk about the human body. And the first topic we're going to talk about is something extremely important that the human body does to help us stay alive, and that is homeostasis. So let me share my screen, and we will go through a little slideshow on homeostasis. Okay, so homeostasis means a constant state. It also means equilibrium. So think about, a seesaw. And if you've ever seesawed, you know that if you are seesawing with someone that is heavier than you, it's really hard to stay equal at equilibrium, because that seesaw is going to go down on their side and up on your side. If you're seesawing with somebody that's a lot lighter than you, it's going to go down on your side and up on their side. So the most fun with the seesaw is when you weigh close to the same, and you can just go back and forth and try to stay around that equilibrium part. So homeostasis is our body's way of maintaining equilibrium or a constant stable state. Organisms maintain a relatively stable internal environment inside their body, even when the environment outside the body is changing. And so what the organisms we're focusing on are warm-blooded organisms. They are the ones that maintain that stable internal environment. Now, cold-blooded organisms, which are called ectotherms, warm-blooded are endotherms, cold-blooded are ectotherms, and the cold-blooded ectotherms cannot maintain their internal body temperature like the endotherm warm-bodied organisms can, like humans. So like if you ever see a frog or a lizard, when it's really cold outside, they cannot move very good. And it's because if it's 30 degrees outside, they are also 30 degrees inside. But we stay around 98 degrees internally, no matter what the temperature is in our environment. So that is an example of how our body maintains homeostasis. There are other examples that we're going to get into as we go through this slideshow. All right, so let's talk about temperature first. So we maintain an internal body temperature of about 98 degrees. But we also maintain other things in our body. We maintain our blood sugar levels, our water and electrolyte balance. That means our water and our salt balance, and our blood pressure. And our organ systems work together to carry out these tasks. So now in our next video, we're going to go into more depth about the different organ systems. But for now, just know that they all are working together to maintain this stable internal environment called homeostasis. So how is homeostasis maintained? Well, there are 3 basic phases of maintaining homeostasis. First, our body detects changes in the environment. Our sense organs pick up changes around us, and based on those changes, whether it's our internal environment or our external environment, we have different sense organs in our body that detect these changes. And when there are changes, these organs send a message to the control center. The control center is our brain. And so the control center then processes these messages that are coming in from different parts of the body, and the control center sends out an appropriate response and tells the body what to do to fix whatever problem is going on. So this is another diagram that shows you the process. And notice that it doesn't really have a beginning or end. It's just a constant cycle that's going on. So our sense organs, our receptors detect changes in our internal or external environment and send a message to our control center. Our control center is our brain and our spinal cord. These messages are received there. They come in from the nervous system, from all the nerves in the nervous system. And then the brain processes this information and determines what the body needs to do. So then the brain sends out a message to the effectors. The effectors are our muscles and our glands and other parts of the body that change as a result of what the control center tells them to do. So one of the best ways to understand homeostasis that we can apply to just an everyday item that most all of us have come in contact with, and it is a thermostat on a heater or an air conditioning unit. So the thermostat is like the brain. And the heater or the air conditioning system has senses or receptors that sense the temperature of the room or the house as a whole. So these sensors that are throughout the house are like our nerve cells that are all throughout our body. And so when the sensors detect a change in the room temperature, they send that information to the control center, which is the thermostat. And then depending on the temperature that the thermostat is set on, then the unit, whether it's the heater or the air conditioner, will decide, the thermostat will decide whether the unit needs to turn on or off. Okay, so let's just say you set your temperature at, let's say 70 degrees. Okay, and it's a cold day. So you've got the heater going and you like for it to stay about 70 degrees in your house. And these sensors throughout your house detect that it is dropping down to 69 degrees in the house. And so the sensors send that information back to the control center, which is the thermostat. And they say it's below 70 degrees, it's 69 degrees. So the thermostat tells the unit to turn on. Okay, so the heater comes on and it runs for a while. And when the temperature of the house gets back up to what it's set at like 70 degrees, then the sensors pick up that information and they send another message to the control center, the thermostat, and the thermostat tells the heating unit to turn off. And so that's why you hear it going on and off all day and all night, because that process, that feedback process is ongoing constantly. Well, this same thing is going on in our body as well. And that's how we maintain a stable internal environment called homeostasis. Okay, so at this point, it would be a great idea for you to pause the video and just write a few notes. The things that you want to write down to remember are what is homeostasis, and then what is the role of the three components that are involved in maintaining homeostasis: the receptors, the control center, and the effector. So if you need to rewind and take a minute just to let that soak in, write down a few notes. Okay, so there are two types of feedback systems that are involved in maintaining homeostasis in your body. The first one, and the most common one, the one that happens most of the time, is called a negative feedback loop. And then under certain conditions, we will have a positive feedback loop. So we're going to learn what each of those is. So a negative feedback loop, move this out of the way. A negative feedback mechanism or feedback loop occurs when there is a change in the environment, either the internal environment of the body or the external environment the body is in, that is bad and it needs to be corrected. So basically, the body's, something about the body's environment is out of balance. And so a negative feedback loop is wanting to fix that and to bring the body back into balance, like a seesaw, okay? So a negative feedback loop will kick in and return your internal conditions back to a steady state when any variation from that steady equilibrium state is detected, just like the thermostat of the home. Okay, so like I said, negative feedback is the most common in our body. There are several examples of negative feedback systems. One we've already talked about is temperature regulation, called thermoregulation. And then we also maintain blood sugar levels and blood pressure levels. And we will talk about each of those individually. So let's talk about thermoregulation, or maintaining internal body temperature. So this diagram kind of helps you see what's going on. You have receptors throughout your body that pick up the information from the external environment. So let's say that your body temperature rises above 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's say you're exercising, okay? And your body temperature goes up to 99 degrees. It's supposed to stay around 98, but it's going up. So these receptors pick up on that and they say, oh, it's getting hot. So they send a message to the brain, which is your control center. Your brain says, okay, let's see what we can do about that. And your brain sends a message out to your effectors. So for body temperature, your effectors are your blood vessels and your sweat glands. So your blood vessels and sweat glands, in response to this message from the brain, begin to increase blood flow to the skin. And that's to get to cool the skin down and to get more oxygen circulating. That's why when you exercise, sometimes your skin turns a little bit red because increased blood flow. And then also your sweat glands begin to sweat, and this process continues until you cool back down. And then at that time, the blood flow will go back to normal and the sweating will stop. This is negative feedback. It keeps on going until balance is restored. This is just another simplified way of looking at it. So if your body gets too hot, you will sweat and that will cool you down. Likewise, if your body's too cold, your receptors will pick up the change in temperature and will tell your brain it's getting cold. Your brain will tell your muscles to start shivering, which means they're just contracting. They're contracting automatically without you causing them to contract. And that muscle contraction generates heat and that warms your body up. Okay, so these are just these constant loops that our body is constantly going through to maintain a stable internal environment. Okay, blood pressure. Let's look at blood pressure just a little bit. So right here in the center of the diagram, you see this is normal blood pressure. So that's where our body likes to stay. About 120/80 is normal. And it can fluctuate a little bit in there and it's still considered normal. But sometimes a stressor, either an external stressor or an internal stressor, will cause our blood pressure to go up. So if our blood pressure goes up, we have sense receptors that detect this change, and they send a message to the brain saying, okay, this blood pressure is too high, we need to do something. So the brain will tell the muscles in your blood vessels to dilate. That means to get bigger. So if your blood vessels are normally this big around, whenever your blood pressure gets high, your brain will tell your blood vessels to get bigger. Okay, by getting bigger, that allows the blood to flow through more smoothly, and it decreases the pressure on your blood. So then your blood pressure returns to normal. The same thing can happen and cause your blood pressure to go too low. Different stressors, either internal or external, can force your blood pressure to go too low. So when that happens, your sense receptors will tell the brain our blood pressure is too low. Our brain will tell our blood vessels to constrict, to get smaller. So if they're normally about this big, when your blood pressure goes low, your brain will tell them to get smaller. And so that constriction increases the amount of pressure that's on your blood, and that forces your blood pressure to go up. For blood sugar, let me find a good diagram. I don't have one in that slideshow. I should have had one pulled up, but here's a good one. So let's look at this one. Okay, so here you see that you have a homeostasis is your set point, your normal glucose levels, about 90 milligrams to 100 milliliters of blood. That's normal. So if something happens and your blood sugar level goes up, let's just say you eat something really, really sweet, or for diabetics, it can go up even without doing that. But if your blood glucose or blood sugar level goes up, your pancreas is part of the receptor that, well, actually it's an effector. So your blood sugar goes up, and since your nerves sense in your bloodstream that there's too much sugar, so they send a message to your brain tells your pancreas to make insulin. Okay, so your pancreas makes insulin, and then insulin causes your body cells to absorb more sugar. Also, your liver absorbs more sugar out of your blood, and that causes your blood sugar levels to go back down to normal. Okay, and that will continue until we reach a steady, stable, normal state, or our set point. Now, if your blood sugar drops too low, which this can happen, if you haven't eaten in a while, most of us has probably experienced that feeling when we should have eaten a few hours ago, and our blood sugar levels go down. So again, we have receptors in our body that sense when our blood sugar levels go too low. So they tell our brain we need to do something. So the brain tells the pancreas to secrete a different molecule called glucagon. And glucagon tells the liver to break down glycogen. And glycogen can be broken down into glucose. So when your liver stores glucose, it converts it to glycogen. So when you don't have enough glucose, this glucogen tells your liver, let's break down some of that glycogen we've got stored up and release it back into the blood so that we can get our blood sugar levels back up to the normal set point. Okay, so all three of those are negative feedback mechanisms that are constantly going on in our body to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so now the other feedback loop, like I said, is not as common. It only happens in certain circumstances, and it doesn't, it's not ongoing all the time like negative feedback loops are. So positive feedback is when the body senses a change that it wants to continue. Okay, so in negative feedback, there's a change in the internal or the external environment that's not good. And so negative feedback fixes it and puts it back stable. But with positive feedback, this change in the body is on purpose. It's a good thing. It's our body needs this to happen. And so in a positive feedback, the body will, instead of stabilizing it, it will try to amplify whatever that change is. So it works by speeding up a biological process for a short period of time to achieve a particular outcome. Once that outcome is achieved, the positive feedback loop will stop. Okay, so like I said, it is less common. It creates an escalated response, which makes our body unstable for a period of time. And our body doesn't really like that, so that this is not going to be an ongoing process like negative feedback. So examples of positive feedback are childbirth, fever, blood clotting, and lactation. So let's look at what happens in childbirth to explain how a positive feedback mechanism or positive feedback loop works. So when it's time for the baby to be born, the mother's brain produces a chemical or a hormone called oxytocin. Okay, so the brain says, okay, it's time for this baby to be born, because the baby's head is in the right place and it's pushing down on the cervix, and the baby is big and it's stretching the uterus. And so the brain says, okay, it's time for this baby to be born. So the brain stimulates your pituitary gland to produce oxytocin. So when oxytocin is released into the bloodstream, it causes the uterus to contract or squeeze. That's where we get the word contractions, because that's the uterus squeezing. As the uterus squeezes, it pushes the baby's head down on the cervix. So the cervix is the opening of the uterus. It's not the same as the vagina. This is further up inside the woman's body. It's up inside, and it's part of the uterus, not part of the vagina. So it is connected to the vagina, but it is further up inside the woman's reproductive tract. So the baby's head, when the uterus contracts, the baby's head pushes on the cervix. This causes the cervix to stretch and get bigger. So the cervix has to go from about this size to about this size in order for the baby's head to come out. So that's why the cervix needs to be stretched. As the cervix is stretching, that sends the impulses to the brain. And those impulses tell the brain to make more oxytocin. So the brain tells the pituitary gland, okay, we need more oxytocin. So you see how it's a positive feedback. It increases instead of the cervix stretching causing the system so the cervix stretching is putting us out of balance. And so in a negative feedback, we would want to get back into balance. But in a positive feedback, we want to keep stretching that cervix until the baby is born. So the brain stimulates the pituitary gland to produce more oxytocin. So more oxytocin causes the uterus to contract more. As the uterus contracts more, the baby's head pushes on the cervix, causing it to stretch. As the cervix stretches more, that sends the nerve impulses to the brain. The brain tells the pituitary gland to produce more oxytocin, and the cycle just continues on and until the baby's born. Once the baby's born, it all stops. So a positive feedback loop only lasts for a period of time until whatever the goal was, whatever the body was trying to achieve with the positive feedback loop. Once the goal is achieved, it stops. So another example is fever. And so fever seems like a bad thing, but it's actually our body's way of fighting off pathogens. So when you get sick from a bacterial infection or a virus, your body will start warming itself up on purpose. So, and that's what produces the fever. And the fever begins to kill the pathogen. Pathogens like 98 degrees. That's why they like to get inside of us. So when our body warms up to 100, 101, 102, those pathogens can't survive and they start dying. And so that's what that fever is trying to do, is kill those pathogens. And the fever will typically continue until it has killed the pathogens, and that's when you start feeling better and the fever goes away. So it's the same thing. So the positive feedback for the fever, the body temperature continues to increase, killing off more and more pathogens until it has achieved the goal, which was to kill the pathogens, and then the fever goes away. Positive feedback. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson on homeostasis. So take a minute before you move on and write down a few more notes. And these are the things you really want to try to remember. So try to summarize what you learned in your own words. What is the difference between a negative and a positive feedback loop or mechanism? Those two words are interchangeable. Why is positive feedback much less common than negative feedback? And then how is a positive feedback loop stopped? Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time as we will go into body systems, human body systems. See you later.